Okay. Welcome. Please sign in. And who would like, can one of you take notes today? Or should I pick?
I'll take notes and we'll find out how bad it goes.
All right. Okay. Upcoming scheduled meetings. Tomorrow, we have the RFC Backlog Bonanza recap. The document for this, I'll post it in the issue, but it's the paper doc from before. The plan was to go over and check how well we did or did not do at following through on that. So I'll just post it right now, paper document. Okay. And after that, these two, this proposal is kind of close, so I'll probably post that soon. I don't know, Felix, if I know you were doing some work towards working on the atomic bomb question.
Yeah, I have something, but I realize there's more stuff I need to probably get into depth about, or I may want to talk to Ralph, to be honest. But I should have something in time.
Sounds good. Action items. I at least got, I don't know what happened last week, something. I didn't check a lot of my boxes. I don't know about the rest of y'all. Looks like we need to follow up on const.ub and do a few other things. But if you're on that list, do it. So let's go move forward. We have this pending proposal allowing the compiler to eagerly drop values. We had some discussion about it last time. I think there was a request to move some of that content into the proposal. I can't remember where we landed on this. Has anyone been keeping up with it? The discussion? Okay. It feels like there's a lot of design work here. I guess the question is, my feeling is this is probably useful and important, but I don't know don't know what the best way is for it to make progress, especially if nobody in this meeting is kind of eager to help lead it along. So it might be that it gets postponed for that reason, and we come back to it. I would like to at least see like a design notes write-up or something, so we have some context to pick it up again.
Yeah, postponing it seems like a reasonable step, and yes, asking one of the people proposing it to summarize the discussion so far might be potentially viable. I think there's a few different approaches that were discussed here, ranging from what would it take to change the default to what would it take to opt into this. And I would agree, no, there aren't enough people wildly excited about trying to push forward with such a change right now.
I guess what I'm looking for, or I'm wondering also about is, what are the steps, are there baby steps along the way? I mean, the opt-in is an example. It doesn't seem quite so baby, but it's certainly smaller than changing a default. Giving the ability to tag a drop impl, let's say, as potentially eager, and the compiler can opt to move it forward. Are there other kinds of steps? I mean, a lint is the obvious one. Linting against potentially surprising temporary lifetimes and things like that. One could imagine a lint that says you should explicitly drop guards of this kind under some circumstances, which would then encourage people to move it up themselves. I don't know. I think we should encourage people. I think we should encourage people to write up the thoughts and to look for kind of small steps we could take to start exploring without needing to I definitely think changing the defaults is out of scope right now. But yeah, But I'd like to be in a place where we have data that we could use to argue in favor or against changing the defaults. That's my point, I guess. So there's an action item to follow up. Is anyone involved in this conversation who wants to take that on? Okay, I will, since I said a lot of things. Okay, const UB RFC. Has there been any follow-up here? I did not do my homework. I know other boxes were unchecked of people to do our homework of leaving comments.
So Ralph responded to some of the feedback, mostly in terms of, you know, I tried to reiterate, like, it'd be good to answer the questions that Mark posed, and Ralph basically confirmed my hypothesized summary of what the actual effect of this is.
Right. Ralph also updated the RFC to make it abundantly clear what some of those things were that I understand where he's coming from, that it felt like it was saying those things already, but I think he's updated it to the point that it restates it in enough places it's hard to miss. So I think that the request of making the RFC self-contained rather than relying on some discussions from the thread is now done.
Okay.
I see that there are still new comments as of like a day ago and today and hours ago. So I'm not caught up now.
Really? Wait, let me reload.
I see Ralph left a comment an hour ago.
I see 3 days ago. That's weird.
Likewise.
Well, there's another response further up in the thread to you.
Oh, thank you.
GitHub.
Yeah. Yeah. The threading.
Okay,
is not,
I can summarize that though. I can definitely summarize what this was. This is just me. I was complaining, saying like you're making statements about like the obvious. Okay, so the summary, in case just to get everyone on the same page, the basic summary here, as I understand it, that Ralph has confirmed, is that what this RFC is really saying is that all undetected undefined behavior during compile time function evaluation will be quote unquote non-consequential, and what that's supposed to mean is basically that there's going to be an obvious semantics to what those constructs actually evaluate to, and we will follow that obvious semantics. And my complaint then was to say, I don't think the semantics is necessarily obvious, and I gave the concrete example of unaligned addresses, and gave two different interpretations of what that could mean to evaluate that. And so Ralph has now said what the interpretation would be in such a specification. So if that's the point, like just that, yeah, there will be some obvious interpretation and we will say what it is and it'll be part of the language. Okay, I guess.
This is actually, that's actually interesting because that's a stronger statement than I thought the RFC was making before. What it sounds like from what you're saying is that we're guaranteeing that there won't be any undefined behavior of compile time code.
If it is, it'll be signaled, I think is what Ralph is claiming.
Right, which is not right. So I'm considering that not undefined because we're defining it like undefined behavior in the sense of like we might blow up your code, right? Who knows what's going to happen? Like we're saying we will provide a guaranteed behavior in response to all code that runs compile time.
Yes, but at the same time, it's not stable, I think is the other point, is that since there's no stability guarantees being made, it'll be undefined behavior, but it'll also be completely unstable, I think.
I thought that the RFC was saying it is undefined in some sense of the term undefined, but we have chosen the set of behavior to be the set that has obvious semantics, which is a little bit inconsistent. Like it's the message here is very subtle. I think this is the fundamental like dispute as far as I can tell, right? Is that Taylor, your point is kind of, this is, there's sort of mixed messaging around how undefined is it and what exactly are we guaranteeing and not guaranteeing. And if we have it, it's not a simple story that you can easily explain.
Right. I feel like this is extraordinarily subtle to the point that like I'm still not sure like what exactly like who is allowed to rely on what behavior where, or if it seems like that we're trying to like make guarantees without anybody relying on them, and we want to say that things have an obvious semantics but not describe what that semantics is, except where we throw an error, and the places we throw an error is undefined, but except for some places where we throw an error that are guaranteed. I don't know. I feel like I'm coming off really negatively on this, which maybe is like, I don't know, maybe is how I'm feeling, but I like really respect that there are a lot of people who put a lot of thought into this and know much more about this space than I do. But it seems like a really non-obvious thing to, like the advantages of providing this guarantee to users seem really non-obvious to me.
Okay. I think we're left with the same action items, unless we want to talk about it more here. I guess I would like to drill a little, but on the thread, not live, unless Ralph were here or something, into what advantage this RFC offers over sort of the two. I know what the advantage is over guaranteeing that we detect all UB, which seems to be compile time, from what I can tell, or that plus the ability to do optimizations. I don't fully understand the advantage of not giving any guarantees at all. It seems like it's kind of a messaging is the main thing that's been said. Like C++ gives some guarantees, so we should too. Is that correct? Is that the only, does anyone have any other reasons?
That was the primary thing that was brought up to me on the thread, that it seemed like initially the plan when we discussed this before in the Lang team meeting, right, when they brought it in front of us, like speaking with Ollie and Ralph, was that we were not going to guarantee anything. And then it sounded like from Ollie's comment further up in the thread in response to me, that plan sort of changed in their minds in response to finding out that C++ did a different thing, and that we should be sort of at least as safe as C++.
Which, you know, I understand. Okay. All right, let's take it to the thread then, unless there's more to say. I guess my final comment is, does everyone agree that like fundamentally, we're not arguing about what the code will do. We seem to be arguing about how we're going to sell it, or like describe it publicly, not sell it in the pejorative sense.
I think that's not true, in the sense that I think that there is, at least in my mind, two possible implementations depending on what we define of, like, we can make the code simple and only detect UB when sort of the evaluation detects it, but we could also do sort of a more invasive, right? Like what we discussed, I think last meeting, in terms of whether we are permitted to do any optimizations on mirror before running const eval, and whether we can even run const eval sort of on unoptimized versus optimized mirror, because they could have, you know, different semantics.
I mean, but no one's arguing in favor of that variant right now.
I think I'd like to argue in favor of eventually running const eval on an RVO mirror. Like,
I guess I'm not sure what variant you mean, Nico, but I think that there has been arguments in favor of both made.
I think, well, there's the three variants I enabled, I described. The like, nothing is guaranteed. We guarantee we'll detect it all the time. And this version, which says we guarantee we detect certain kinds, but not others. At least that's how I understand it.
Right, but certain kinds, like, to me, that implies that we can't do at least some optimizations.
That's true.
And so in some sense, it's splitting mirror. Like there's multiple stages of mirror, and some are, you know, useful for some things and some are useful for other things. And I don't know.
If we had optimizations that masked those, that would be true. Yes.
Sure.
I don't know if we do. I'm just looking. Okay.
I mean, like the obvious semantics for like accessing like a local variable after it's been, you know, moved from or something like that, like a pointer to it, or like it doesn't have an obvious semantics, right? And so that's a case where like you could make up one, but it's probably not going to be the thing that matches what you get if you're doing an NRBO cast, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but I think discussing on thread personally is the thing that I would expect is the right next step here. I
Yeah.
just haven't gotten around to.
I think so too. It's just, yeah. So, all right, let's do that.
Before we agree to that, I still feel like Ralph is pretty. It seems like Ralph is at least annoyed by the process at this point, or has been for a little while, and doesn't know how to further improve the doc to like respond to what we've said. Are we expecting to have from the discussion on thread some sort of concrete feedback for Ralph to move this forward, or what's going to happen?
I'm expecting that reading the doc and again, looking over the thread will, at least for myself, help me to take a position between those three alternatives and argue with Ralph if it's not the one that Ralph landed on. But
And I think at this point, my feeling at least is that one thing that might be helpful is to tell Ralph that I think it is true that there is not at least explicit alignment within the link team, in the sense that like the comments being given are not necessarily in the sense of saying no, they are in the sense of trying to, continue discussion.
right.
Yeah, I think on balance it is safe to say nobody's saying we absolutely shouldn't do this. We're just trying to get a very clear picture of exactly what this is, and it seems like we're not necessarily disagreeing on principle. For example, Taylor's comment about wanting to make sure that we're not promising these under all circumstances as a guarantee. Nobody jumped up and said, no, we should absolutely promise these under all circumstances. The question was whether the RFC was claiming that we were.
Yeah, although I kind of think we should, but I haven't fully decided.
Okay. Nobody previously jumped up to say that we should.
I sort of like going on one side or the other. I see Taylor's point, so I haven't. Like a message of we detect UB or we don't makes sense to me.
Yeah, I would be fine with like being in the minority here and saying like there are a bunch of smart people involved in this discussion who disagree with me, and like I will like trust them to have thought about this carefully. But I actually think I'm at the point now where I don't think that additional clarifications on the RFC are what I need. I think I actually just disagree with what this RFC is doing. I think that I actually would prefer a world in which some things that you did in const eval that were undefined behavior, we didn't guarantee a behavior for, even if that means that we in practice we detect them and don't provide mere optimizations on CTFE. I would prefer a world in which we left ourselves the option of doing those things.
So I think that is what the RFC is proposing, Taylor. As far as I can tell, the RFC.
It isn't. I think that's wrong.
I agree with.
Interesting. It seemed to me like the RFC was stating that we try to detect these things, but we don't guarantee that we will detect these things, and that seemed
and what
like
happens
what you
when
were
we don't
asking
detect
for.
them, though, and what happens when we don't detect them, because that's the crucial detail I think that differs between what Craig and Taylor said.
It states explicitly, no, it also does identify certain classes of things that we do detect guaranteed and cause compilation to stop with an error. So it does both.
What do you mean by guaranteed, though?
It says the following kinds of UB are detected by CTFE and will cause compilation to stop with an error, dereferencing dangling pointers, using an invalid value in an arithmetic, logic, or control flow operation. So that sounds like a guarantee to me. If that's not a guarantee, then I don't know.
And interestingly, it's a guarantee about what the Rust compiler will do, and not a guarantee that users are allowed to rely on in Rust code, which is, I don't think, the thing that we have a precedent for before. Like,
I think,
I don't know.
yeah, that situation certainly arises to some extent, but in weird ways. But okay, we have to move on. I mean, I don't know. Are we? Well, I guess there is some legit disagreement then, or at least Josh, you don't agree with Taylor's summary of what the RFC says, which is interesting.
I think that's worth a further conversation offline. Yes.
Yeah.
Taylor, do you want to follow up after this meeting and we can try to talk through some of that?
Sure. I'm actually gonna have to drop off this meeting midway, but I'm happy to follow up on the Zulip afterwards. I'll stay in there.
Okay. See you this afternoon then.
Okay. Change visibility scoping rules for macros. I kind of think we should just close this RFC at present. It's mostly talking about, I think we decided not to do it for this edition, and whatever is going to happen, it's going to require some changes, right?
Yeah, it's already on FCP postponed.
Yeah.
It's,
oh yeah,
yeah, it's already
I forgot
in
we
FCP
said that the last
postponed.
time. Great. Okay, let's move on. Declaring macro metavariable expressions.
That one already passed FCP.
It did. Cool. Okay, we had talked about giving the Lang team a heads up, as I recall.
The libs team.
The libs team, sorry. I see that you
just
did so.
that.
Okay.
Yes, I just did that today.
All right, so this is in FCP. Great. Then let's move on with that. Repr C is unsound. Any updates here?
No movement since the previous summary of people are trying to figure out if it's possible to modify Repr C without breaking existing code.
Yeah, there aren't even any comments. Is it worth us inserting a, like, do we need to provide any guidance, or do we feel the thread is answering the questions we want answered?
And does it need an owner from our team? Probably not.
The current status
I don't
is,
think it needs an owner from our team. It couldn't hurt for us to summarize that we're expecting this is the current blocker, and we would like someone to determine that definitively one way or another.
that sounds useful to summarize our understanding and make sure that people on thread agree with it. So can someone, Josh, can you write it in the notes actually? Like, can we say it out loud to make sure we're on the same page? Like, our understanding is, I'll tell you what I think it is. We as the Lang team wanted to have Repr C match the C compiler, but there's investigation as to whether that's possible or would break too much existing code because of bindgen behavior. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Not just bindgen, potentially other code, but bindgen is a good case study in seeming to use and rely on that behavior.
So it seems like what we're asking for is probably not a judgment of, like, not the answer to that question, but the data we would need to answer that question.
Right. It's also worth noting bindgen itself is not necessarily a showstopper as long as there is a way to get the appropriate behavior that bindgen is expecting. We have had cases in the past where there was a missing feature in the language, bindgen worked around it, and then the feature became available and there was a migration required for when do people want to use that. So there may potentially be churn in bindgen as long as we don't actively break existing code.
Okay, I see. So you're saying we can change what code bindgen generates as long as the code that we know that has already been generated is like mostly still going to work? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay. All right, good. Then action item for Josh to write that comment. So next issue, function arrow out is valid for unsized types. Seems ungreat. So here's the code example. Or a code example.
Yeah, I posted, yeah, I guess you can write your code example first. I mean, I think the person posting this or someone who gave feedback said that basically, in short, that we should, disallow types, first class function types with an unsized return value in general. Though I guess there might be some cases where that can work. I don't know if there's cases where that actually can work in like, I don't know if there's, since it can't compile it successfully today anyway, there's no harm in disallowing it, right?
I think that's right. We intentionally, I'm trying to remember, we intentionally permitted unsized types for the arguments. This is sort of an interesting, the fact that output is sized. Okay, sorry. So we intentionally left space for the argument types to be unsized because we wanted to enable a future extension wherein they were allowed to be unsized. So that you could pass data down without boxing it. The return type, there have been proposals for what an unsized type might mean there, but none that have gotten, that seem to me to sort of, they're all kind of complicated. I don't think we found the right combination yet. The fact that output has a size bound kind of blocks our ability to do that though, now that we think about it, because there's no doubt existing code that assumes that the output is sized. That may not be true. There may not be stable code that makes that assumption because you can't write function bounds in stable code without using the shorthand notation, and that requires you to specify an explicit return type. So plausibly, we could remove the bound from output. That would be another possible fix. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that would not affect any stable code.
Wouldn't it stop compiling if I guess, no, that would be over restricting. Yeah. I think you could maybe rely on it today, but it feels difficult to come up with an example.
It wouldn't surprise me if there's some way, but I'm not sure what that way is. Specifically because to write the bound, you have to do something like this, right? And that means that R will have a size bound. We could test it.
If you just add question mark size to output in FN1s and stuff, then you get a whole lot of errors if you run exploit check.
Yeah, it might be that unstable code breaks, but I'm not sure whether stable code breaks. I wouldn't. So I have to look.
Themselves don't even compile them.
Oh, the traits themselves don't even compile. Oh. Yeah, okay, I can see why.
I mean, I just added it and ran exploit check, and it gave a lot of errors.
Yeah, it would be a little work to remove that. All right. It seems okay to require function types to be sized. I think we can plausibly. All right, I don't know. I'm trying to think how we should follow up, how urgently on this, and who should own it.
So I was assuming that the obvious path was to have the restriction, but you're saying you prefer to explore removing it?
I'm musing about it.
All right.
I don't know which I think is better. I'm not sure how much work I want to do to remove it. The reason I am torn about it is that I feel like that might be a future direction we wanted to go. And I don't know if we don't get a lot from requiring that things are sized, maybe I'd rather have less requirements. But we get at least something, probably the default. I'm assuming the traits have some code in them that's assuming that output is sized. I think we should take it offline, but it needs to be assigned to someone. I don't know if I have time to follow up on it. Or, I mean, how high priority do we think it is? It's P high for T-compiler, not P critical. It doesn't seem especially worse than other unsound bugs. Do we know if there's even stable code that can be affected by this?
That's one of the questions. People were like searching for ways that it could break stable, but I don't think. I mean, there's claims. There's a comment in the middle of someone who says you can observe the unsoundness, and then there's like feedback like, wait, this isn't actually observing unsoundness. It's just a case you might expect to compile, but shouldn't. But it's not. It sort of depends on what you define as observe the unsoundness, I guess is the point. Like it might not match expectations about what's being allowed to compile, but it's not like, as far as we know, causing UB.
Yeah, I see.
So I take it that if we tried to add the restriction, your point is going down that path would basically make it even harder for us to remove this restriction in the future.
That's my theory, but I'm not sure that's true. I guess not without implied bounds or something. I think it's probably the right path is to require that return types are sized. And if we're going to change it, we're going to have to deal. But
well, I would be willing to own just adding the restriction or making sure that it happens. Or rather, Esteban has volunteered to add the restriction for that matter. So I think we have.
All right. Let's at least get that. Let's do that PR and see what happens, I guess.
Okay. Okay, you can own. I'll post me as owner. I'll just assign myself.
Okay.
And I'll post a comment.
All right, next one, define field element reference number 933. This is a reference issue that was nominated for us. The question is, how do we want to handle terminal? There's a specific comment from Javi. How do we want to handle terminology for accessing the values in tuples, tuple structs, and arrays? The reference currently says field and element, field for alphabetical names and element for numerical names or array values. I don't know, this is a pretty detailed terminology question. I'm gonna copy and paste the options rather than just reading them out loud. I don't know.
This is absolutely the ultimate bike shed kind of thing. We're literally being asked, what color would you like the bike shed to be painted?
I mean, I think there's strong precedent against, I don't know what languages would refer to array elements as fields. So I think we can work like incrementally by just like ruling out cases.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to agree with that as well. I don't think that case 3, or for that matter, case 4 is appropriate. We want to use field for structs, and we want to use element for arrays. I think the only question is, what is the name of the thing in a tuple? Is it an element or a field? Do we think of a tuple as a struct with unnamed fields, or as an array of a fixed size? And
We
I
have
think
an
the answer is
RFC.
sometimes both, depending on what you're doing.
We have an RFC actually that says that
Go on.
tuple structs are structs with field named by integers. So
Precedent, helpful. Which RFC?
15 something. I don't know why my brain remembers that. 1506.
I'm going to say option
Awesome.
2. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that citing that as precedent and saying here's why we're calling them fields seems completely reasonable. Scott, do you want to summarize that and point to the RFC that you just impressively remembered?
Sure.
Yeah, there's lots of places where we treat tuples like they're structs. So that seems like reason enough. Okay, great. Let's move on. Next issue, rename value expressions and place expressions section to evaluation categories. This is about, this is about the section of describing kinds of expressions. I feel like we've had this discussion so many times. I don't really like evaluation categories to me because it's, maybe I do. It doesn't sound, I guess because it
doesn't
evaluates
sound
to
like
a place in memory is the reason, but I feel like it's more like of a syntactic restriction, and that sounds very semantics. But
so as far as I can tell, the proposal isn't to rename either a value expression or place expression. It's what do we call the category of those things, whether something is an L value or an R value effectively.
I see. I feel like, wouldn't we call it categories of expressions? But
yeah, I think evaluation is the unusual term here. I think expression is appropriate because they're both types of expressions.
yeah, I don't know. I have to look at precedent too, but. All right, why don't we leave
So
people
wait,
leave
is
comments?
the suggestion then, wait, is the suggestion like expression categories? Is that what I just heard?
That's my suggestion, but I'll just post it as a comment on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, since they're both X expression and Y expression, then having it be expression categories seems pretty reasonable.
Okay. Consider deprecating weird nesting of items. Oh, we've been over this a few times. We decided not to do this in the current edition. I think probably this can be like we decided at some point, if we're going to do it, we should just. Oh, Pink Felix even proposed to close it and we all FCP'd it. So really we can just unnominate this, I think. Scott did leave a comment. What's the right way to go forward with 2024? Scott, I think the answer is implement a deprecation.
Write a project proposal.
Yeah, and implement a deprecation as a lint now, and then we can up the severity of that down the line, essentially. Like there's still value whether or not.
Yeah, it's someone needs to write a concrete proposal of what we'd actually be trying to deprecate, and then
Yeah.
we have a bunch of vague ideas about it, but I don't think there's a concrete description of it. So that would be needed, and then a lint for it, and then we can talk about the things. So yeah.
Okay. I can write a comment saying, closing the issue and saying, if anyone wants to pursue this, the way forward is to propose a concrete lint either as a PR or project proposal. That's an action item. Okay. Const precise live drops tracking issue 73255. This was nominated by Ali 3 days ago for stabilization. I'm trying to remember this. I remember when it was implemented. Check. It seems like this was the PR number 71824. Check for live drops and constants after drop elaboration. The idea was to get more precise so that if you had code that doesn't need to be dropped because it's been moved or something else, you won't give errors.
Did we ever get clarity on whether this does the like weird exposing like internal semantic stuff, or is it matching borrow check now? I remember some comments about it.
I'm rereading. I think our conclusion was we don't think it is today, but my opinion is that the way it's implemented could allow that to happen.
But that would be a breaking change, right?
Well, it might accept more code than we want to, for example.
You mean the current implementation?
Right. But
Yeah.
basically what's happening is it's being, as long as it happens immediately after drop elaboration, it's probably fine. I think my concern was that we might do some optimizations in between or something else that would like remove some dead code or make it accept things that it wouldn't have accepted otherwise.
Yeah, I guess it feels to me like we should match drop check, but I admit that I don't care much. It feels weird to have separate rules.
Well, sort of. The borrow check has its own rules, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel strongly.
I'll take a look and make an opinion. All right, stabilize OR patterns.
This, I think, got the concern resolved, so it's got 3 open checkboxes.
Oh, well, then I'm gonna put my comment right now. One thing that we were discussing is what kind of, in the 2021 edition discussions, what kind of migration we want here, and if any. And there's not that much breakage. So like on Zulip, Josh, for example, we were saying maybe we don't need any, but we were thinking we aren't ready to give up yet on at least giving users some warnings. It's pretty easy migration to warn about in theory. So I'm going to try to take a stab at writing up some mentoring instructions and finding someone to issue a lint that basically says your use of basically suggests changing pat to pat 20. Oh, you know what? There was one other thing, minor thing, but suggests changing pat to pat 2015.
2018.
20, yeah, that's the minor thing. It should probably be 2015 because that's when the behavior started. At
so
least-
for the pendings, I called them 2015 and 2021, and now I saw here we call this 18 and 21. So we should change one of the two.
That's fair.
I'm gonna throw a concern for that. Like, can we rename to Pat 2015 instead of Pat 2018 because the precedent from elsewhere. X.
For what it's worth, though, as far as I can tell, this is not currently proposing to stabilize either of those names, 2018 or 2021,
Okay,
which means that doesn't actually need to be a blocker on stabilizing or patterns themselves. It's just a blocker on stabilizing the new pat matchers and therefore on stabilizing any kind of transition.
Yeah, but I think it would be weird to stabilize the new OR patterns if that means that there is no way to write code that behaves the same in both editions, in both the current and the next edition, right?
I think we should go ahead and, well, if we go ahead and land the new matchers now, seems okay.
I'm not arguing with that. I was just observing that we specifically asked for those to not be included, and so
I
they
know.
weren't.
Yeah, let's just do it in a separate PR just to not be annoying. But back then I was more dubious. Now I think we're ready to go. So
I just think it would be really bad state if we do change the behavior of just Pat in the edition and not have a
Well,
way.
I don't think we've changed the behavior of Pat yet in this PR.
It is mentioned
Does it?
at the top of this one.
I feel like we should change the behavior and introduce the matchers in the same PR.
Okay, it's already changed in new edition. That happened 1st of January.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. And never mind then. All right, take it. Give me an action item to talk to Mark about this and figure it out. Since that's my liaison issue. Okay, include adjustments to allow unsizing coercions for raw slice pointers in receiver position. I have no memory of this. I may have volunteered to figure something out and I think I didn't get to it. Sort of remember taking an action item for that. Oh, right, this is the raw slice pointers thing. Let me review this and come back to the meeting after that. I want to review it anyway. Okay. We make unaligned references future incompatible warned by default. Okay, so the context is we were accessing, taking the address of packed fields unsafe, but we now have a safe way to do it using adder of. And the proposal is to start warning as a future compatibility warning that will eventually become, in principle, an error across all of Rust to access fields in that way, although it seems like the kind of thing that may go to this, to a hybrid state. Does this mean we're going to make it safe? Just warn? I think it does.
Apparently so, and which is, I mean, if somebody else complained about that, and I find it really strange.
Yeah, it seems strange.
I mean, I can understand the sort of long-term logic of being like, well, if we're going to forbid it, why bother even having required unsafe block? But we're not in that state of forbidding it yet.
I guess I'm confused. Before we required an unsafe block, but that really had no effect. It just silenced the error. which is
Correct.
like always true about unsafe, but I don't know.
If the effect was the person was making a proof obligation that what they were doing actually made sense, even though it, right? Like as in ensure your structures could be
Right.
aligned to satisfy the guarantee that you need to be meeting.
Yes.
I think, right, but I think Ralph is making the argument that in practice, the unsafe block is not necessary if you do it correctly, right? You want to always go through a raw pointer, and then you will need an unsafe block when you dereference that. But the creation of the raw pointer, which is the correct action, it never requires an unsafe block. And we don't actually want to support taking a reference directly, even inside unsafe blocks is the claim being made.
Sure, I think I buy all of that. I'm just saying if there was any way in which this could have made sense before, and the only issue is you had a proof obligation, then it seems to me like you should continue forcing the proof obligation, even with a warning.
The major reason to not do that is just less code, I guess.
That's
Like basically less code in the unsafe code checker. I'm trying to figure out what is the reason. So here's my summary of what Felix is saying. Felix, tell me if I'm correct. We want this to be a hard error and we're all on board with that. But in the meantime, why not also make it unsafe? So that it's unsafe code that you will not be allowed to write in the future instead of safe code that you will not be allowed to write in the future. Is that correct?
Essentially, I mean, I still regard it as a simplification that if this ever made sense in the past, if you actually could have a proof obligation that would make the code make sense, then, and we just are saying there's a better way to do it going forward in terms of the pointer adder of, then I think the form that is the old form should still require unsafe. I don't see the benefit to anyone of removing unsafe. If I can understand what you're saying about it, if it's simplifying the implementation of the unsafe checker, that's an argument. I just think it's a pretty weak one.
Yeah, I think that it makes, not a lot of sense personally to tell people to use unsafe, because I think it actually in some sense hurts our message in the sense that if they can move to adder of, yeah, I don't know. I don't feel strongly, I guess, but I feel like the argument is being made, and I think correctly, that people currently using the unsafe may think that that is sufficient to get what they want, because that is usually in some sense true about unsafe. Like they think the proof obligation is just, not actually exist.
But that is not, I mean, I don't know how to fix our messaging to fix that interpretation of the unsafe keyword, but.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand the current proposal. If I'm reading this proposal correctly, it's saying that right now we're proposing to warn if you do this in safe code, and we don't currently have such a warning if you do it in unsafe code. And the new proposed behavior is to just always warn, because this is never a good idea in either safe or unsafe code. So it's not that we're making it not depend on unsafe, it's just that we are saying we need to complain at you either way to not do this. That doesn't seem unreasonable, or am I misunderstanding this?
That's my understanding of the proposal as well.
That's definitely what it's saying.
So I think the thing this feels to me is that if this removes the need for unsafe in code that can do this, it ought to at least, put it in the forbid unsafe code or something. Like,
I maybe I'm not following you. It doesn't,
because it can be unsound in safe code if you do this.
it's you mean taking a raw pointer to it?
No, a normal reference.
A normal reference is,
We don't always put future compatibility warnings in unsafe code group. Like there's lots of ways to make unsound.
yeah.
There are bugs that we have fixed that we don't.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm willing to. After this discussion, I now realize I misinterpreted the current state of things. I didn't realize that we actually were requiring an unsafe code block in every usage before. I see now it's that we were warning and saying you should have an unsafe code block, but without that,
Right.
you only got a warning. All right, I withdraw my complaint then.
and I'm
Yeah.
just a little confused by the mixing of the two parts.
Yeah, I
see.
do
So
think
we were
the
always issuing a
description is
lit.
a little confusing, but
Right. It was a lint that was sound spatting unsafe before, and now it sounds a different way. Okay.
I see. Okay. Yeah. I'm in
Right?
favor.
Am I right about that at least?
That's my interpretation. Yeah.
yeah, we're not making
Right.
unsafe unnecessary. We're just no longer making it suppress a warning.
Is adder of actually stable?
It's stable on nightly and beta, and will hit stable in like 10 days or something.
Okay, let's do it. I'm in favor. But okay, so to summarize, this conclusion was we believe the current state is there is a lint against this which is silenced by using unsafe.
I have a hard out, everyone. I have to go.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's all right. I'll finish this up. There's a lint that's silenced by using unsafe. This PR makes this a future compatibility warning lint and recommends the use of adder of. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I should check that. And we are in favor as the link team. Roughly that, right?
Yeah, I think that's the conclusion.
All right, I will leave it. Give me an action item. I'm gonna make myself a reviewer for
Okay.
this PR. I care about I'm not convinced that we have the great suggestions, so I want to take a look. Okay. Cool. We did pretty good. Next time I might reorder some of these newer things first. All right, thanks everyone.